California's June gloom may be long gone, but for San Diego Mayor Bob Filner, there are plenty of dark clouds looming. Days after Mayor Filner entered behavioral therapy rehab, more women have come forward alleging that Filner made unwanted sexual advances, with 3 more just this week. The total now stands at 13. And the stories just keep getting worse. According to the New York Times, yesterday, 2 female veterans came forward and said they received unwanted sexual advances from Mayor Filner at an event last year for veterans who were victims of sexual assault in the military. Both were victims of rape. Bob Filner, the man who chaired the House Veterans Affairs Committee for almost half a decade, was hitting on military sexual assault victims. One of the victims, Air Force vet Aldana Fernandez, said she met Filner at a women's veterans healing and hiring fair. After the event, Fernandez claims Filner left her voicemail saying, "Hi, it's your newly favorite congressman, Bob Filner. You know, the one who fell in love with you at your last speech. I don't want to wait till you come back to have dinner with you." Appearing on MSNBC this morning, Fernandez reflected on exactly why Filner's behavior was so depraved.
This is an organization that helps women, and an organization of women who have all been victims of sexual assault, sexual trauma in the military. We trusted him, and apparently he hit on about 7 or 8 of us within the organization, which to me is very egregious, because to come into an organization like that is supposed to be a safe space for us to heal. That's why it was called a healing and hiring fair.
At present, even though more than a dozen women now have come forward about his inappropriate behavior, even though he is now being sued by the San Diego City Council, even though city attorneys have ruled that the mayor is no longer allowed to be alone with a woman while on city business, and even though San Diegans are petitioning to kick him out of office, Mayor Bob Filner refuses to resign. Joining us now from San Diego, Filner's former deputy campaign manager and one of the women to come forward about the mayor's alleged harassment, Laura Fink. Laura, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Alex.
So tell us about what it was like to work for Mayor, then Congressman Bob Filner. This seems to be a long trajectory, a sickening trajectory that ends, if it does end, with him harassing women who have been raped and were part of our armed services. Give us your history with him.
Well, I worked for him in 2005, and it was certainly a very tense work environment, and on all levels. So the sexual harassment part of it was only one piece. It's a very dehumanizing work environment. It was a little bit different then, in that he had folks around him that I think probably served to inhibit this behavior. What happened to me in 2005, I was serving as his deputy campaign manager. I was at a fundraising dinner where my job was to move him from table to table. One of the guests said that I had worked my behind off for him and that he should really appreciate me. I was standing directly behind him, and he told me to turn around, which I proceeded to do, and then he looked over at me, patted me on the behind, and laughed and said, "Nope, it's still there."
This was all set in motion, Laura, in large part by a hotline that was set up by the Sheriff's Department to field sexual harassment complaints against Mayor Filner. Were you surprised that are you surprised that he got this far, that he went from Congress to being the mayor of San Diego, given his behavior on the job, in public, with numerous women?
You know, it's hard to look in hindsight and determine that, simply because all of this was, these pockets of information were isolated. We all did not know about each other. I mean, you've run down the list, but you will see as more women come forward, and as more women have come forward, that this was really pervasive behavior. I don't know that that's something that everyone was aware of. I think you get isolated as a victim, and you don't want to tell your story, and you tend to not want to talk about it, or feel that you'll be dismissed or not believed. And so it's not like we had all the information in the aggregate. Am I surprised knowing him personally? I am not surprised. However, I'm extraordinarily disappointed.
Laura, we're going to open this up to our panel here in New York. Karen, the fact that this man was in Congress for as long as he was, and Laura makes a point that these were not happening all at once and the victims didn't know about each other, but this is clearly a line of behavior. And as Dave Weigel writes in Slate, Bob Filner spent 20 years in the House. At no time did any colleagues file ethics complaints against him. Filner's ultra slow motion downfall tells us just how long you can get away with being a creep in politics. I would say the piece of this about the military sexual assault victims takes it into the realm of not just terrible and unconscionable, but actually depraved. To be preying on women who had been raped, to take advantage of them is sort of an unspeakably heinous, I would say, crime.
Yep, I completely agree. And if it wasn't completely obvious that he should be out of office before, that should be the last straw. However it can be done, whoever can help campaign for enough signatures to have a recall, whatever it is, I'm happy to give them money for it because it's disgusting. But I think the point that she makes is so important, and we talk about this with rape victims, we've talked about this with military sexual assault victims, time and again, what's part of the problem? That women don't feel comfortable coming forward. He wouldn't have likely would not have gotten that far if more women had felt comfortable coming forward, been taken seriously, and those things recorded and marked. I mean, at a point, it would have been impossible, I would like to believe, for an ethics committee to ignore that many women coming forward. And so I think we need to remember, be totally disgusted by this man's behavior, but this is why we work so hard when we talk about the Violence Against Women Act, when we talk about those things that are meant to protect victims, that are meant to make it easier for victims, male or female, to come forward and be believed and have it be taken seriously.
Well, and you know, it also brings up, Michael, the issue of military sexual assaults, which the president addressed yesterday. Chuck Hagel is going to be proposing new guidelines in the Pentagon, but there's still resistance. I mean, that still faces kind of an uphill battle in Congress. I mean, when Kristen Gillibrand was trying to take the process out of the chain of command, she faced incredible resistance, and there is still a culture of this is how it works in the military, and screwing with it in any way is going to undermine the efficacy of our armed services.
And it's important to note that the current crisis over sexual assault in the military is not new at all. Like, for a decade, there have been scandals every year or two at some military academy somewhere or another. The details are horrendous. We talk about it in the press. The military says, oh, we're going to take care of it. We've got a new commission. We've got a new report. We've got a new hotline. And it never is solved. And I think what Karen says is absolutely right. That what will change this is consistent, persistent people coming out and being public about that this stuff is happening, and not letting it fade from the headlines after Hagel issues whatever, changes.
And Laura, thank you for coming out and sharing your story, because it is important to hear from victims. I wonder, as a San Diegan, as someone who's worked with Mayor Filner, how do you, what's your assessment of the recall efforts? We know that there are 101,597 signatures needed. The petition drive cannot begin until August 18th, so there are 39 days to get this. Do you think the recall effort will work?
I think it faces a Herculean effort. We have it started without a team in place due to some political wrangling here in San Diego, and I think it's going to be extraordinarily hard to get 4,000 signatures a day with a largely volunteer effort, where a lot of the major interest groups and donors in San Diego are staying on the sidelines. So it's going to be extraordinarily challenging. I certainly hope that this lift can be made, but it's going to take a lot.
It will certainly. Speaking out and keeping the spotlight on the behavior of a man who is clearly unwell, if these allegations are in fact true, is one way to do that. Former Deputy Campaign Manager for Mayor Filner, Laura Fink, thank you so much for coming on the show.